I've written a couple of books. If you would have asked the younger version of me if I would ever write a book, I would have said no. I'm lucky I passed high school, um, which to me it's a lesson that one of these days I'm going to actually talk to high school students, like ninth or 10th graders, and explain to them all the different career professions that there are. Because my guidance counselor, in my opinion, was useless. It was the equivalent of, she could have just told me, like the line out of Caddyshack, the world needs ditch diggers too, right? When I told her I wasn't going to school, I wasn't going to college, she didn't really care what I was going to do because I wasn't one of the top students. But when I found the fire service, I found my calling. And when I later found out all the different avenues that you can do to go to college, I mentor young people all the time now. In my volunteer department, some of the junior firefighters that are in my department, I teach them about all the different things that they can do. One of them is going to the University of New Haven, where my daughter graduated from. He's going for fire protection engineering, so he can go and get a and even if he doesn't become a career firefighter somewhere, right? Because so many people that wind up, they have a single goal: I want to be an FDNY firefighter. But there's so many other things that you can do. Um, and then you could also continue to be a volunteer firefighter or move to other areas. EMTs are in demand, but to tell them the possibilities, because those possibilities I was blind to them. I had no idea. If somebody would have told me I could have been a fire protection engineer, or I could have did something related to the fire service when I was 16, 17 years old, I probably, not definitely, I probably would have did better in school. But it wasn't until later I get in the New York City Fire Department and then realized I need college credits to promote to lieutenant. I need 40 credits to get promoted to lieutenant. So what did I do? I took the lieutenant test, and then I started going to school and said to myself that at that point, I said, I'm going to get a degree. I don't care if I ever get promoted again, I'm going to get a degree. And for the next 15 years, I was either studying for a promotional exam or going to college full time. I needed 80 credits to get promoted to captain. I needed a bachelor's degree to get promoted to battalion chief. And then after that, they don't care how much education you have. So I wound up getting my bachelor's degree, and then the fire department, in conjunction with the government, sent me to the Naval Postgraduate School, and I got my master's in security studies from the Naval Postgraduate School. But it's a lot easier if you do that when you're 18 to 25 years old than when you do that when you are 48. When you graduate with your master's degree at 48 years old is a very different experience than if I would have did it when I was younger. And young people need to know that story, and far too often they don't. So this is really cool. Seeing the book in libraries really makes my day. The first two libraries that it went into was the National Fire Academy and the FDNY Fire Academy. So I was at the Fire Academy, so that was a captive audience. They really had no choice. When I said, here's some new books for our collection, and I'm friends with the superintendent of the National Fire Academy, so that was a pretty easy sell as well. But when I see it in public libraries, it's just it's so cool, and I'm so appreciative that that you have it here and to be here tonight. Thank you for all the people that made this possible, and for everybody that's here. It's really cool to see a former member who I walk in. He says hello. I should have known him, right? I haven't seen him in years, but Al Lipsky here was a member of East Farmingdale way back. What year did you leave East Farmingdale? 83. So I was a junior firefighter, but I had known the name growing up around the fire service. So one of the absolute perfect things about the volunteer fire service. Who's a volunteer firefighter in here? So I set you up because I see the shirt. So I figured there's a pretty good chance you're a volunteer firefighter. How long you been in the service? 21 years. So I grew up in the fire service. My brother joined when I was 7. So I've always been around the fire service. So when I was 14, I joined. And I think about how valuable an experience that is for firefighters, and just in general, right? The experiences I learned. I met, and I'm still good friends with people today that they would work 2 or 3 jobs to support their family, still found time still found time to volunteer their time serving their community. Um, Even though I've been a member for 40 something years, I never lose sight of why people join the fire service in the first place. Their reasons sometimes get skewed through the years, whatever, because they get jaded on different things, but they join for all the right reasons. And we're always looking for more volunteers, especially try and encourage our young people to join because of the life lessons that you learn, the professions I saw. I was introduced to the New York City Fire Department from firefighters that I looked up to in my volunteer department. People like Rick Welliver, who was a firefighter in Engine 292, Pat LaRue, who was a firefighter in the Bronx, and several others. John Bavacqua, who was a Brooklyn captain at the time. Fun fact, he was also a substitute teacher in my high school, which I'm like, how's this guy teaching in high school? And he's also a firefighter. I didn't understand the fire department schedule, but those firefighters, all of the volunteer firefighters, were really into training and into being a firefighter. But those that were called them two hatters, those that are career and volunteer firefighters, just seemed to be like a cut above. And then you got to meet some of the other firefighters that they worked with, and I was hooked. This is what I wanted to do. So um, those early lessons in my volunteer fire service, even lessons that I learned being on the hose line with at my first working structural fire. It was a factory fire in East Farmingdale, and on the line was my brother Bobby, and one of his good friends, who's now a past chief in East Farmingdale, Mike Kilbridge. He's still an active member of East Farmingdale. Mike Kilbridge is, and they were calm as a cucumber in that fire. And I didn't tell them, but I was pretty damn nervous. I was very nervous, and they were joking. Yeah, they probably knew, but the teamwork, and afterwards they're patting me on the back, and just it's just a surreal feeling. The teamwork and the family that you learn from being in a volunteer, the generations of people that I'm friends with, where I was friends with your grandfather. Now I'm friends with your father. Now I'm friends with your children. And I have multiple friendships where our friendship spans three generations, which is pretty cool. One of my really good friends now, um, I've been good friends with his parents since he's been born. His mother has since passed away, and I'm still good friends with his father. His father's approaching 90 years old, and he's got children that are now almost in high school. Um, so it's pretty wild. So that's three generations, um, and there's a lot of examples of that in the fire service. So when I'm 17 and a half years old, I take the New York City Fire Department test, um, and I get hired when I'm 23 years old, and I just loved it. It was 1992. Um, I got on the job October. Got into my firehouse in December, 2.5 months before the first bombing of the World Trade Center. My company at the time did not respond, but my company was relocated into another area because of the response, and that was the first time I had heard of them holding over people. After September 11th, the fire department went into total recall, and everybody had to come back to work. But my 24 partner, who I went to Proby school with, and we got assigned together, they married up so we could do switch tours around. The two stupid guys, the two junior guys that didn't know what they were doing, so they only had one of us working most of the time. He was held over, so that was the first time I had seen that. Several years later, in 1998, so I started in Brooklyn. Several years later, I would go 323 engine, Flatlands in East 65th. If you're familiar with the, oh, so there you go. Yeah, so you know the area well. Yeah, Mill Basin, Flatlands. Yep. Met a lot of great people there. Worked with a lot of great firefighters. When they expanded special operations in 1998. I applied, and I was a charter member of Squad 270. They added five new squads at the time, and I was pretty honored to go with such a short amount of time in the fire department, only 5.5 years. Um, the captain of that company, Tom Richardson, is going to be one of the speakers next week. If you've never heard him speak, he's just or just knowing him, right? He's just an exceptional human being. I talked about Glenn earlier and what an exceptional human being he is. Tom Richardson even tops him. Uh, so he was I had met him. He covered a vacation that my captain was out on vacation, and he came and covered it. And I got to work with him a bunch of times, and it was just impressive how genuinely he cared about our training and our well-being in just the 3 weeks that we worked together. And I speak about him quite a bit in the book. He would go on to be FDNY chief of department. He's been the chief of Deer Park Fire Department twice. His dad was the chief in the fire department as well. Just a great person. He was John's. That's right, and he was John McNamara's chief for many years as well. And so you know how great of a guy this is, right? He just never forgets. He's just exceptional. I texted him earlier today, so we're gonna for a project. The IAFC is the Safety, Health, and Survival section is doing something on 9/11, and I asked him if he could be involved with it because they want to. What has changed in the fire service, health and wellness wise since 9/11? So I got him and Joe Jordan, who was chair of the contamination reduction group when we started in the FDNY, to be on it because they don't know how to tell me no, just like they don't know how to tell you no. So I go to that company in 1998. Tom Richardson is the captain of the company. They had taken him away. He was actually at the time he was the captain in 234. And they took him where he'd wind up being the chief down the road when he'd get promoted a couple more times. And then worked with him for a couple of years. September 11th happened. I was working in Squad 270. So that morning, I was actually at my son's daycare. We were taking him actually to his daycare. My wife and I and my wife's mom, we were there when my mom called and to ask me if I was working. She was in special operations. I said, I'm not working. She hates when I tell the story because I said, no, I'm not working. And she said, good. So she hates that I say that because it sounds callous, but it's a typical mother response, right? And so our study group was all special operations. Most of us were X'd the night before to work overtime. I was X'd to work overtime on September 11th in hazmat. Hazmat was going to have company medicals and they backfill hazmat. Yeah. So hazmat was at medicals. So that's hazmat 1 and squad 288 are in quarters together. And they lost everybody that was working except for one firefighter, the resource firefighter in hazmat. But the hazmat members that were supposed to be working were over getting their medicals in Brooklyn, and they all responded. So all of those people that responded, the people that should have been working in hazmat that were getting their medicals, were also killed. So that firehouse lost double the amount of people that they would have lost under, dare I say, like a more normal day. But our study group was scheduled to meet that day. I was in charge of our study group, and if you missed the study group because you were working, you were automatically out of the study group. There was 0 questions asked. If you took overtime or worked for somebody, you were out of the group. So because of that strict rule, everybody knew better. We had a rule that you had to write your questions on a typewriter or a computer. Most of us used a computer. And we had one person who didn't, and they were thrown out of the study group. Their questions were terrible anyway when they would write them. But we were strict, and the same. We were studying for lieutenant, and the same group of people studied for every rank. And every one of us got promoted to deputy chief, and then we would add other people into the group as we went along, and every time they would get promoted as well. Tom Richardson was added to our group when it was time to make sure he got promoted to deputy, because if you can't become chief of department or chief of operations or chief of training, the positions that he would wind up holding. If you're a battalion chief, you have to promote to deputy chief to be appointed to those positions. So I was off that morning, and that my brother was a New York City police officer at the time, um, and he was not killed. My mother-in-law was supposed to be flying home to Florida that morning. Her flight was canceled, and she wound up staying with us for an extra couple of weeks. I wasn't home, so I didn't even know she was there. My brother-in-law worked in the trade center and spent the night before in the trade center. Um, he was a bit of a workaholic. One of the things that his mother did was took his law degree and brought it to the trade center on the 10th of September and dropped it off. She finally got it from him. It sat in his house for years, unframed. She brought it to him on the 10th, presented it to him in his office, and she went home. And then on the 11th, she was with us. So he had his framed certificate for one day, his law certificate. He left a message on our answering machine that morning. Um, so he heard something. He thought it was a window washer. It was a plane crashing into the other tower, and his message said, "I'm in the other building, the safe one, asking me what I would tell him to do." Luckily, I didn't answer the phone. I would have told him to shelter in place. He wound up going down the stairs because he had somebody in his office. This young lady that was watching out, looking outside the window, and saw people, and so they decided to walk down. So he was in front of the. When they got down, they just kept walking. He was in front of the Woolworths building, and he knew exactly what had happened when the first tower um, came down. Um, I got down there that day. A couple hours after the second tower came down. We went into total recall pretty quick. I called to see if we were on recall, and I was told no, not yet. To stand by my phone. The firefighter I spoke to wound up being killed, and then I got into my firehouse. I couldn't go any faster than I was going. I got to I was listening to News Radio 88, which is no longer around. When I heard on the radio that the first tower had come down, I was in Valley Stream, right at the border of Queens and Nassau County. Got to my firehouse in South Queens. We loaded up a bunch of supplies and we headed in. The streets were empty. There was lots of stories of streets being congested. We went through the Midtown Tunnel. We went across to West Street and we went down, and it looked like a nuclear winter. Everything was white. I had very little experience down at the Trade Center. I was detailed 18 months previous to September 11th to Rescue One, and there was a fire in the Trade Center, and we went there. It was the only time I'd ever been in the building. So I had no recollection, and we would get down there, and we worked and basically stayed down there in alternating shifts uh, until May of 2002. And Mike Milner, who's here as well, was a firefighter in Rescue 4, and Rescue 4 lost an unimaginable number of people on September 11th as well. Mike helps out with people to this day with mental health things and stuff. So Mike, thanks for being here. It's pretty cool that you're here. And he's very active on social media with that. So people, because they've gotten to know him, and he's I hate to admit this in front of him, but he actually is a funny guy. And it lowers the barrier, so people don't mind reaching out to him, which is really cool. Um, my company, we didn't lose anybody on September 11th. We had people working the night tour in other companies that had been relieved and were on their way back. In one case, the firefighter tried to go back and he missed the company. He watched them pull away. But we haven't been spared. No company has been spared from losing people related to 9/11 illness, and very few people that were on the job on September 11th can say that they don't have anything related to September 11th. But so the job would eventually give out these medals that nobody would wear. In fact, my medal I have in a case, and this is the first time it's ever left my house. Even either of these items, it's the first time they're in my office, and they gave out different medals, and they gave out 3 different medals depending on when you were there. One of them was a survivor medal if you were there before the Trade Center came down. Another one was rescuer, which is what I have, which means you were there after it came down, but before September 13th or the 12th. I don't remember the exact time. And the other was like a campaign ribbon where you got something because you were on the job. So that was my helmet shield in Squad 270, and that was the medal that was given out. And you can come up and look at these later on. So down at the site, one of the very rare, one of the things you never saw was glass. And early on, I found a piece of glass and I took it home because I thought it was neat. So this is a piece of glass from the World Trade Center. I have this on a shelf, the same shelf that those items are on. I never saw a piece bigger than this the entire time I was there. In fact, this was like on one of the first days where I was just like, "That's interesting," and I took it. And here's a piece of steel from it as well that I have. That one of the guys in my company was very good with cutting, and he actually would make a bunch of crosses out of the steel. And when different relationships that people that did stuff for us, we would give those away. Sadly, I was not smart enough to make sure I had a cross of my own because they were beautiful. They are beautiful. One of those crosses went to this lady, Joanne Rogano, who was a third grade teacher in Valley Elementary School in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Beaver Creek, Ohio. Where the heck is that? It's about 15 minutes from Dayton, Ohio. Where the heck is that? That's about an hour and a half from Columbus, Ohio. Other than that, you got to look at it on the map. But it's a fantastic little city, that little community. And her third grade class, they adopted my company after September 11th. And so as it turns out, she was born and raised in the Bronx and then moved with her family there and wanted to do something after September 11th. An amazing teacher. So they sent us everything. They were constantly sending us gifts to the firehouse, all things about Ohio. They sent us an Ohio State flag. They sent us whatever snacks. They even sent us fish. It was frozen. It was just incredible. So I made a promise to her that when we were done, a couple of us would visit them. And the following June, we visited them. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So one of the most memorable, the two most memorable things in a positive way from being down at the Trade Center site was that when we would leave, we would typically leave via West Street. And about a month in, it took about a month before they got everything situated where they would have, where we'd have to go through basically a rigged car wash when we left. So we'd go through this car wash, and when we left, it didn't matter if it was 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., there would be 100 to 300, maybe even 500 people on the street corner waving American flags, cheering for us. It was incredible. The unity of this country was, I have never experienced that before. I had never experienced it since. I could imagine that after Pearl Harbor, the country maybe felt like that. I could imagine after we put a man on the moon, the country felt like that. But we haven't, in my opinion, we haven't come close to the feeling that we had seeing all these things every single time thanking us. The other thing was when we were done, or we would take a break down at the Trade Center site, they set up these tents, and we'd go in these tents, or we'd go into the church. I'm forgetting the name of the church, but there were a couple of them that were set up over there where we would take breaks. Yes. One on Broadway, St. Paul's. Yeah, St. Paul's. Yeah. So we would take short naps in there in the middle of the night, but we were getting thousands and thousands of cards from school children around the country, and I knew that my daughter's third grade class was writing letters as well. So I started replying to them. I mailed out more than 1,000 thank yous, because I would bring a stack back to the firehouse after every tour. And eventually I got smart and I put it on the computer, and I would write out. I wrote out what I wanted to say, and it was because I had seen, and I think it was my daughter that came home with it, a thank you letter from a New York City police officer. And I'm like, there's no way a cop is going to outdo the firefighter. Then I went to a local print shop and had them. We took our rig and we brought it over to Shea Stadium, and we took a picture. And I went to this print shop and asked him. I said, "Hey, I want to get these printed." And so he printed a couple of thousand of them for me. Didn't charge me. At the time, his office was in Lindenhurst or North Lindenhurst. And I recently saw the bill, right? The bill was zero, but I saw the order for it. And I went online and I looked them up, and they're somewhere out here now, and I can't remember something litho, but they seem to have grown a great deal, which I'm like, that's karma, right? They were a pretty young business and they took care of us. And I tagged them in a post on Facebook a couple of months ago, and I was so excited that I saw it, and even more excited that they were still in business and doing well. So I would take the photos and I would put them on the kitchen table with an explanation. I would tell all the brothers and sister what we were doing, that I was mailing these as thank yous. And they knew how I was, and they just went along with it and they signed it. So it's funny because I still have about 15 of the ones that were signed, but I don't have any that I signed at the time. So I guess I was the last one to sign them when I would mail them off. But no one was more persistent than Valley Elementary School and how they adopted us. And when we went out there, oh my goodness, when we were done and we went out there for a couple of days, we were treated like kings. It was crazy. We were on a different morning show. The media traveled with us everywhere we went. We were on the cover of every newspaper in that area. I have them here somewhere. I'm out of order from what I was going to do, but so the day we left, students say tearful goodbye to friends, and pictures of us with the school. Multiple pages in here. They mailed us a flat Stanley, so we took the flat Stanley everywhere we went, no matter what we were doing. We even in front of the when we were doing our high angle drill, or in front of the stock exchange. And then we brought them back with us when we went back. An evening to remember that they did for us at the elementary school. I was on the front cover, a young version of me. Yeah, so and all of the papers, the Dayton Daily News, which is their large paper in the area. We brought a flag that was flown over the FDNY command post. That flag is in the Valley Elementary School principal office. There's a tree planted out front for us, which they did as well. And again, they just even the Wright Air Force Base, which is there, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They hosted us. We even made their paper. It was just really, really crazy. They kept wanting us to say coffee, especially when we were on especially when we're on the CBS or no, the NBC affiliate on the morning show, and the Yankee kids say, "Can you say coffee again?" I'm like, they say it weird. They say it weird. So I'm with my people here, right? So I say coffee. You're like, yeah, coffee. That's right, right? That's how we say. That's how we say coffee. But not knowing who was going to be in the audience today, I saved papers of September 12th, the news day. Get out of order here. When President Bush came and met Bob Bethwick, a firefighter, he recently passed away. So I did not get to meet President Bush when we were there, but I did get to meet him when I responded down to New Orleans in 2005 for Hurricane Katrina. So he comes into the mess hall, and we just so happen to be on our break. Um, and he comes in and they lock it down. You see all the Secret Service people. He wanted to come we were down there. It was the first time many of us were out of New York for September 11th. It was the first time I wasn't home for September 11th, and we made our own makeshift area that we were going to have a memorial. And the president wanted to come, and we told him no. We told him no. Yeah, could you? Yeah, but he came the next day, and we talked about our mutual hatred of the Yankees. As a Met fan, as a long-suffering Met fan, he understood that. At the time, he was a part owner of the Texas Rangers as well, so the mutual hatred was fine. I should have talked about his absolute perfect strike that he threw at Yankee Stadium, but I wasn't smart enough to remember that. I've been in my career in the fire department. I met President Bush, President Trump, and President Biden. So also met Jill Biden, also met Fauci, also met a bunch of other people. I'm not looking to get into politics with you, but yeah, I'm just saying that I met them. And we're all familiar with this photo, right? So this photo this was on the front page on the 13th, right? So that's been a photo that's been around for a very long time. September 12th, again, the 15th, again, with the president. And even people would send me them from other places. So September 12th, St. Petersburg, Florida, and their take on it, which is pretty cool. The way that people were sending me that stuff. Following September 11th, I was on duty when Flight 587 from American Airlines crashed after takeoff. It remains one of the deadliest aviation incidents in the U.S. 270 people total were killed on that. That morning, we were at the firehouse getting ready to go to the Trade Center site when a firefighter that just got off duty, came running inside and said, a plane just crashed. And with that, you could hear all the chatter suddenly on the Queen's frequency, and they were getting multiple locations. So I researched. In the years that would follow, I paid close attention to that and learned a lot about it. That flight, they blamed the captain for they had wake turbulence when they took off, and he overused the rudder, causing the engine to fall off. So the engine fell off in one section of Queens and started a fire in a gas station, and then the main fuselage landed and killed 6 people, and then everybody on board as well. So yeah, in Rockaway, Queens, that was, and very few people even seem to remember that because it was so overshadowed. And that was in November, so it was interesting. It was there was a benefit concert called the Concert for New York that took place like the night before, and one of the firefighters who had lost his brother, Mike Moran, gets up and he says, Osama bin Laden, you could kiss my Royal Irish ass. And if you want to know where I live in Rockaway, Queens. So I went to the Concert for New York, and it's an amazing. You have the DVD. It's an amazing concert. It was an amazing experience. There were so what they did was they gave away tickets. There were a ton of tickets that were given away to the firefighters, to the iron workers. It was for many of us, it was one of our first days off. Because even if you were off, you were going to funerals and such wherever you could. Even when you were working, if there was one in your area, you would go. And the majority of firefighters and iron workers in the audience that night just pretty much cried the whole night. But when I hear those songs, to this day, for the different artists that performed that night, it's pretty moving. My regret is, so the concert concluded with Paul McCartney on stage singing a song, and they allowed, so the firefighters could do anything you want that night. We could have went anywhere. I met half of the performers, but I did not go on stage, which I could have, because they were letting anybody go on, any of the first responders in uniform. You had to be in uniform. But it was really cool to see the people that I was working hand in hand with, the iron workers, because they had a true unsung heroes of 9/11 is the all of the iron workers and what they were doing, and you'd see them at Madison Square Garden at night, and you go up and you just give a big hug, and it was pretty cool. The other time when I was down there, so on 9/11, another member of my volunteer fire department, Ray Holsworth, he was down there, and I saw him. He is a monster guy. He's huge. Um, he would tell you he's big boned. I would just tell you he's big. So when he saw me, and we were about 100 yards away, and as we're running towards each other, I don't know how I didn't break any ribs. He hugged me so hard, um, that he was working as a police officer and I was working as a firefighter, and we were both all right. Yeah, and then I also had the pleasure in that later that year in October, I was working so I was working with the PD. So you might recall that after September 11th, we had the white powder incidents, the anthrax incidents. So on our off tours, those of us in special operations had to go and work these tours with the NYPD Hammer team. So I was working a tour with the NYPD. We are in Manhattan when we thought it was a building explosion. So we thought, remember, right in this period, everybody thought we were on high alert for additional terrorist attacks, and uh, and we get a report, and it winds up being a scaffolding collapsed. So here we are. We don't have all the proper equipment with us. I'm not with my regular unit, and we're crawling around rescuing the people that are trapped. 5 people died in this. Another incident that wasn't even 5 dead, 11 hurt in this scaffolding collapse. That it was news for like one day, where it was on the front page. But speaking about the high alert that we were on, I was talking about the American Airlines crash in November, and so I'm responding. And so after September 11th, I always carried my cell phone. Cell phones were very different back then. Flip phones, they weren't the smartphones you have today, right? The iPhone wouldn't come out until June 29th of 2007. I know it's June 29th because that's my wedding anniversary. It just so, but you think about if smartphones were around back then, how much video, photos, how different the historic context of the incident um, would have been preserved. Firefighters at the scene, when we were down there, and somebody had a camera, with the media or not, and they were filming when we were removing one of our brothers or a civilian. We would take their phone, we would take their camera, we would take their film out of their camera. That's disrespectful. And you think about how some of those photos might be good to have today. Not all of them, but some of those would have been good. But so I'm responding down to the Rockaways, and I call my wife on the phone to ask her if there's any other planes that are missing. I put on CNN, let me know if there's any other planes missing. And she's like, "Why? What's going on?" So as she's putting it on, I told her what's going on, and she said the military is scrambling some fighter jets. So we get down there, and the next thing you know, the airspace over New York City is being protected by fighter jets. I heard them, and I knew what they were because of my wife, because the incident command didn't know what was going on. It didn't take long to figure out that it was jets overhead. I did have my phone on September 11th, and I was when the other building collapsed down there. I forget the number, whatever the seven when seven. Thank you. When Seven World Trade collapsed, I was actually on the phone with my wife, and she's like, "What is that?" I said, "The other building just collapsed." She's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Yeah, the 40-story building that's been burning all day." But anyway, my phone, I had an AT&T phone at the time, and it was one of the only phones working down there, and it got passed around for an hour. I didn't see my phone, but then I got my phone bill at the end of the month, and I called AT&T and I explained to them I'm a firefighter, and I had one of the only working phones down at the Trade Center site, and they said thank you for your service, uh, and they readjusted my bill to what I would normally pay, which at the time was like $25, as opposed to the several hundred that it would have been. Um, so that's a cool story. Um, when I was down on the 11th, um, I was down in the stores underneath the trade center, And I took the front page of the paper off of one of the. I just took it, crimpled it up, and just threw it in my back pocket, and that's where it stayed. And it was just like I said, at some point, I'll think back to remember when life was normal. What was the stories that we cared about? I mean, we cared about the Giants playing the Broncos the night before, but they lost 31-20. I don't like the Giants, so I don't care. And then it's just another thing that I just saved. And I remember one of the first days I was off, I went to my local library to get a book about the Trade Center, um, just to see where things were, just to find out where they were. And because I didn't know, and I was frustrated that when people are saying, "Yeah, it's in the main atrium," I'm like, "What are you talking about, the main atrium?" Um, so I thought that was interesting. Um, I have a brand new book that came out last week that it's supposed to be shipped to me by today, but it hasn't arrived. The only known photo that I have of myself at the Trade Center site is in that book. I've never shared it. I've never done anything with that photo. I've never even showed it to anybody, other than when I got it. It was like some German photographer who sent it to a firehouse a couple of years later, and I wound up getting it, and I never shared it, and it's in that book. But it didn't get here in time, so I can't even show you that, because true to the word, huh?
What's the title?
That one is called "In the Mouth of the Dragon," um, and it's "Toxic Fires in the Age of Plastics." It's the second edition. The first edition of that book was written in 1990 by Deborah Wallace, who is decades ahead of her time. An amazing individual. Um, she is, I think, 87 years old now, and so the first edition of that book made me very interested in understanding toxic fires and how they impact people. And I remember I'm listening to her speak about it, and I ordered the book right when I was listening to her. So 2 years ago, I reach out to her, I send her an email, um, and the email came from the FDNY email address. She told me that's the only reason why she answered me. Um, and the Zoom call, one Zoom call I had with her, was, I would like to buy 200 copies of your book. So every time this book, it's out of print. So every time it would go on um, Amazon or anywhere that you could find it, eBay, if it was $20 or less, I would buy it. Then there was one time the cheapest copy was like $500. I'm like, I'm artificially inflating the cost of this book. So I said, I got to reach out to her. So at the time I had bought probably about a dozen copies, and I've given them, and I gave them to people to make them soldiers in the war on plastics, and understanding how plastics lead to cancer in firefighters was primarily my concern, but it goes far beyond firefighters. The new car smell that you smell is not good for you. It's your plastics off gassing in your car. We just love it because if you're like me, I don't get a new car that often. So that tells me I'm doing something right, that I can afford. I can afford to get a car payment. Um, so she says that can't happen. The book's out of print. I said, well, can you do a second edition? That can't happen. I'm 70, whatever, 87 years old. I said, all right. How about you? How about we co-author one? She goes, that can't happen for the same reason. I said, how about we co-author one where I use 6 of your chapters, and then I'll just give you credit as a co-author. She agreed to that. She's put so much work into this book. It's been such a great ride with her. She was one of the original investigators of the MGM Grand Fire in Las Vegas, which had another fire only a couple of months afterwards. Now legislation has changed drastically in Las Vegas. We added some other chapters into the book. We made it geared more towards firefighters. So we put some chapters in there about how modern contents impact fires in today's environment. We added a story about a fire that I had on January 9th of 2021. I was one of the early incident commanders at the Twin Parks fire. We transported more than 65 victims. 32 of them were in cardiac arrest. Yeah, That is unheard of, especially in the type of building that it was in. But many of the fire safety features failed, and the contents of what's in today's fire are different. Today's fires, they need a lot of air to release their energy. They're energy dense, and they grow quickly. So when you see on the news, and I've seen it in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of advanced fires on arrival before the fire department gets there, and that's because there's a lot of plastics involved, a lot of synthetics, where cottons and natural fibers, they would still burn, but they didn't burn as rapidly. So that's what this new book addresses, and we have a whole chapter in it about the Twin Parks fire. So 32 people were in cardiac arrest, 17 people lost their lives. So it actually is a incredible amount of people that were rescued. The FDNY removed over 100 people from that building, but even the fact that modern medicine and CPR and the medication that the paramedics were able to administer to the victims is why we had that many people that were in cardiac arrest survive. But generations of family, it was an immigrant community. The majority of people were chasing the American dream in the building, and in some cases, 3 generations of the family wiped out. Multiple fire was on the second and third floor of a duplex apartment, which means it's 2 levels in one apartment, and we lost people on the 19th floor. We should never lose fire. We should never lose victims that far away from a fire in a building, a Class 1 fireproof building. But doors were open, stairwells were open, lots of different things had happened. So that contributed to that. Any questions? Yeah, I can talk about that. How are we doing over there? Who do I have over here? How old are you?
You're finishing drinking. You're interrupting dinner.
I'm interrupting dinner. 9? Thanks for coming tonight. What do you want to be when you get older? A what?
An author detective.
Murder detective.
A murder detective. I love it. Thank you. That's great. So this book. So why did I write this book? We'll start with that. So I was asked to do the keynote at Firehouse Expo. Pete Matthews, the editor of Firehouse, he calls me up and he says, I need you to do the keynote, and I need you to talk about leadership and training, and the rest is up to you. I said, all right. I said, but I don't see either of those as really a problem in the fire service. They weren't a problem in my volunteer department, East Farmingdale, and they were not a problem in New York City. Leadership, we have great leadership. The uniform leadership, in my opinion, has been great as long as I'm on the job, and the firefighters are well trained. I think they're among the best trained firefighters on the planet. And what I would learn as I travel around the country and speak, I speak quite a bit now on leadership and strategy and tactics and occupational cancer as well. I learned that there's a leadership vacuum, actually, is what there is, and there is a problem of leadership and of training and of proper training and qualified people to do the training. So when I did the keynote, I only had one request with the keynote, is that I wanted him to record it and then put it on YouTube. And I wanted that because I wanted everybody to have access to see it. And some of my favorite keynotes that I've watched from the fire service, I wasn't present for, but I was able to see it. So he did that. So when I did the keynote, there were roughly 1,400 people in the audience, but many, many more have now seen it. But I had a friend who told me, they're like, you have to take that keynote and make it a book. They said it was your career sprinkled with stories and leadership throughout. So if in the FDNY, we go out the door so many times on runs. For example, where I was a battalion chief in Elmhurst, Queens, we had engine 287, ladder 136, and the 46 battalion. I was in the 46 battalion. Between the 3 companies, we went out the door more than 13,000 times a year. That's a lot of experience per year. Times that by a 32-year career, Um, and everybody in New York City Fire Department retires with a ton of stories, a ton of experiences, and I was able to put them into this keynote, and that's what convinced me to write the book. In fact, it was my friend Chris Stewart who was in the audience, who that same day. So he's now a retired deputy chief from Phoenix, Arizona Fire Department, and he was the one who told me it. And he said every story, every timeline is another chapter. And then he told me to read Wisdom of the Bullfrog, which I had read. So that's Admiral McRaven, one of his books. The read is about an hour and 20 minutes from cover to cover. All of his books are very short but good reads. So I read that. I read that book, and the vision for the book took place because he had stories with leadership lessons from his military stories. Um, and I sent Chris an outline of to see what he thought, and he said that's great. That's what I would do. My son, who wound up being uh, really the publisher of the book and the editor, designed the cover. He would tell me, "Yeah, Dad, this chapter is great, but it doesn't belong in this book." I'm like, "You know how long that chapter took me to write?" Um, but there were several chapters that wound up not being in the book that I thought were but really good, but didn't fit the flow. Um, I got lots of editing from my daughter. I got lots of editing from my wife. Um, but I've always been able to sound things off of them uh, uh, when I need to write something. And so off script because it's not in the book, but a couple of years ago, I wasn't happy with the direction of civilian leadership in the department, nor was I happy with the direction that they wanted to go with training and in particular safety. So I was going to write. I wrote a letter, um, and the letter was a request to be demoted. And I had a pretty good feeling because these things, when they go up to when they circulate in different floors of headquarters, have a way of finding themselves in the New York Post. Um, so I needed to make sure that it was on point and right. So I sent it with a description of what we're going to do, and I sent it to my wife, my son, and my daughter. And so I think it was my daughter who replied like the first and said, "I'm proud of you. There's a couple of edits this needs." My wife, so then my son replies, and he goes, "There's more than a couple." Uh, and then my wife's like, "Give us a couple of days to get this right." It was something along those lines. And less than 24 hours later, it was significantly better. It was perfect, actually. I submitted it, and 2 days later, it was a front page story on the Post, including the exact letter that I wrote. So a spelling error or something taken out of context wouldn't have been good. So fun fact, they never demoted me. They eventually made some changes for the better, which continues to this day. But um, uh, all in all, a bunch of us wound up requesting to be demoted because of the direction of the fire department. And so leadership lesson right there. Sometimes you have to stand up for what you know is right, and that's what we were doing. Um, as leaders, it was our job to make sure that we were protecting the firefighters that didn't have the same ability to voice their opinion as we did. That's my job, is to voice. If we're not looking out for the health, safety, and wellness of our people, I'm not doing my job if I stay quiet. Especially my last three positions in the FDNY were chief of the fire academy, chief of training, and chief of safety. So if I'm not standing up for safety and training, I can't expect others to do so. But getting back to uh, the book starts out talking about East Farmingdale, as I did tonight, because that is the foundation um, of my fire service career. It's largely the foundation um, of really of my childhood. And I joke around about it. So I wanted to be a firefighter since I was introduced to the fire service, with the exception of one day. So and that was because um, there was construction going on. They were putting in sewers in front of my house. So there was a digger man out there. And so for that one day, I wanted to be a digger man. And that's because I'm out there with my Tonka toys and I'm playing. And the guy who's driving the truck sees this, and he asked my mom if he could take me on a ride around the block. And she says yes. But then the next day I was back in the firehouse, and the allure of the fire service was too great. Um, and I continued on the journey to be a firefighter, doing the 3 years in the juniors. Then talks about joining the FDNY. One of my early mentors in the FDNY. So there were many mentors that I've had. I'm blessed in the fact that I had so many mentors in the volunteer fire service. And then in the FDNY, on my very first time I walk into the firehouse, um, I'm not even working. I just graduated Proby school. I come into the firehouse and I meet Captain Gene McGowan. And he sits me down. He's like, I'm going to give you two pieces of advice. Read something fire related every day and learn something from everyone you meet. Sometimes you'll learn what not to do. And I have taken those and internalized those, and I have followed those rules every single day. I've continued to read something fire related every single day, with the exception of a couple of months after September 11th. I am a learning sponge. I maintain a beginner's mindset. I learn something from people that I may not even know. I'll learn something from an interaction I see. I'll learn something from something you say or do or whatever it is. I've become good at being a learning sponge. And I am far different person today than I was 10 years ago. One of my friends, he likes to say, you should always be getting better than you were. He says, I used to poop my diapers. I don't anymore. He says, I will again one day. But he's gotten better. He's gotten better in these mid years, right? Um, so that talks about Gene McGowan, and he was not an assigned captain. He was there. He wound up being a battalion chief in your husband's firehouse. Did you ever know him? Did you? Okay, because I'm not sure. He might have been there before then, because that was a while ago. That was 1992 that I met Captain Gene McGowan. I went more than a decade without seeing this guy. Then I saw him at an honor flight at JFK Airport. So we got notified that a flight was coming in with all veterans, which happens all the time, and they get people to go. And I happened to go this time, and he was there. And that was the first time I had seen him in like a decade, and told him, "Hey, you're in my book," because he didn't know. And then it goes on and it talks about some of the different fires that I've had. I have a couple of guest authors in the book as well that talk about some of their stories. Joe Jordan, who retired as an assistant chief in New York City, he wrote a chapter. He was the incident commander for a blackout in New York City that lasted a couple of days. Some of the experiences that he gained from that, and each chapter concludes with 5 leadership lessons. And why does it have that? Because that's what Wisdom of the Bullfrog has. After every chapter, it tells you what you should have gained from the chapter. So even if you sleptwalk through the whole chapter, it'll tell you these are the things that you should have took away. And I'd be like, I didn't get that. Let me go, and I go back and read that chapter, and then I got it. And in that book, and for me learning, I like when it's chunked out. Each chapter is no more than 20 minutes to read. My son did research on what makes a good book. Um, the size matters, the weight of the book. There's so many different things that he did research on to it. But again, I love seeing that it's and it says local author, which is really cool. Um, I will. I definitely will. And a chapter on, like I said, the Twin Parks fire is in here. But I want to. There's a picture in here.
Was that in the Bronx?
The Twin Parks fire was, yeah. So this picture here, this is from the West Babylon 1987 yearbook. Yeah. Yep. That's yeah, I know. So on the far left is. That's right. That is so true. So Dwayne Welliver, who's on the far left of this picture, He would go on to be a New York City police officer. He's now retired. He was also chief in my volunteer department. The next guy, Randy Scott, he also would go on to be a New York City police officer. He retired and now lives down in Carolina. I'm in the middle. And then the guy just to the right of me is Steve Storer. He took a different path. He wanted everybody to like him, so he owns an ice cream store. He owns Old Fashioned Ice Cream Store, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary in the neighborhood. That is on Straight Path and the Southern State Parkway. You go there once, and you're going to wind up going there all the time. And I know you got good ice cream stores here, but yeah, that's really good. So we had a rule in my house because we live right down the block from it, that if you want ice cream, you got to walk. You got to walk to the ice cream store. So I don't feel like going tonight. Well, then you're not getting ice cream. So if two of us walk, two of us get ice cream, and we'll have it gone before we get home to you. And then Paul Partain, who's the guy all the way on the right, he would go on. He graduated high school and went to Fort Greely, Alaska, as a firefighter. And we didn't stay in as close a contact during part of that time. He now lives back in the neighborhood. And when he came out of the military, he worked for an elevator company, which had its ups and downs. I know. Thank you. Yep. I had to do a dad joke here somewhere, right? Thank you. You like that? Thank you, Lily. Why don't you come up here with me? Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Give me a hug first. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you want to sit in this chair? Yeah, sit there for a few minutes with me. So Paul would, I guess it's probably about 10 years now. He calls me up. He's like, Frank, I'm thinking about a career change. Yeah, what are you going to do? I really want to be a paramedic. I said, oh, I'm going to quit my job. I said, that is some midlife crisis that you're having here. I said, I think it's a great idea. So fun fact, his wife is a lawyer. So he can afford to stop working for 9 months and get a job. He absolutely loves his job. He saved countless people. I communicated with him almost daily during the pandemic, and he was constantly transporting people, working for Northwell, primarily in Queens and in the city, but he works out here a lot as well. He's now a supervisor, and my God, he could not have planned it any better to do what he was doing, and to be able to do that paramedic school and just like if he's the guy that transport you, you have the right person, right? And I think, is there a picture of you in here? There's a picture of my brother in here as well, on the back step of the fire truck. And I often think if I could have one more conversation with him on the back step, one more time with him, one more conversation. Yeah. You're mentioned in here, right? Are you mentioned in this book? I know you're mentioned in here. I just didn't. I thought there was a picture of you. Jess, is there a picture of her in here? Or is it the other book? So it's funny. So when I do a presentation, almost every presentation has at least one picture of Lily in it. Oftentimes, and I tell people, I'm like, you'll see many pictures of Lily throughout. She's mentioned in all of my books. And usually there's a picture of her. And a new article, when I write an article, I write a decent amount of articles for different magazines, and I try and put them, I do that as well. I put pictures of her. And now we have her in person, and I can't find it even though I'm looking. Do you like this book? You do. I appreciate you telling me that too. Yeah, but it's so Cornerstones of Leadership. To sum it up in a few words, my picture's on the cover, but the book isn't about me. It's about all the people that I've met in my life, both in the career and volunteer fire service, and the lessons and the stories that they've taught me. And that's what each of the chapters represents, is different people that have impacted me. So to be a learning sponge, to continue to do good, right? How old you going to be soon?
5.
You're going to be 5. I can't believe it. And you're going to be a big sister soon? Yeah. Yeah.
Are you gonna go to school soon?
Soon, right? Yep.
Wow.
Hey Frank, I got a question for you. In your experience, I mean, you were an assistant chief, you did safety, you did you did your toxic fire stuff and everything else like that. What is the reason that the New York City has not released the toxicity of Ground Zero? In the air in the days after September 11th, and what did the fire department do to try to pressure that?
Well, so it's my understanding that's way above my pay grade, but they are still trying to pressure them. We're going to get the data released at some point. Um, and it's hard to find, it's hard to figure out who's holding the data. And I mean, and why, right? Because the people that were in those positions are no longer in those positions. But it'll eventually come out, and the lawsuits will certainly continue, and maybe be personalized, right? If an individual, I mean, Christy Todd Whitman could have came out and said about it right away, right, and chose not to. We still would have worked. We still would have did what we were doing, and even to say, the protection, the mask. I have a as you realize, I save a lot of stuff. I have my respiratory card. OSHA was there, and you had to get a respiratory card saying you were certified to wear a respirator. This little laminated card that they give you. But we couldn't have worn, like, you couldn't wear your we would have ran out of we wouldn't have been able to do what we were doing if we were overly worried about protecting ourselves. We wouldn't have been able to do the job. That's the bottom line.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, but
it's just dumbfounding that
Yeah.
5 years after
yeah.
there's files that that are under freedom of information.
And the pressure seems to keep mounting on it. I think we will find it, right? For years they said it didn't exist, right? Now suddenly they exist.
I have a question somewhat related to that, about health and safety at the site.
Hmm.
Now, on TV, every weekend on Channel 55, they have the program to sign up for that, like the for the World Trade Center health program.
Yes.
Barish and McGarity.
Uh-huh.
Now, what's the reason behind that? I don't understand it. Why they're still doing this after 20 years? They can't get people to sign up. What's the problem? What's stopping them? They don't know that people went to school, they work down there, the residents down there, and he goes, there's 35,000, but there's only 35,000 people in that whole zone. They put the whole zone south of Canal.
Yeah.
Are they kidding me? I thought there's several 100,000 people, so they're not saying white people, they're begging people. You could sign up for this program. You're not taking money from other people.
Yeah.
They have to beg people to sign for the program, and they're not doing it. And they're doing this, every week they have this on TV.
So the fact that it's still,
What's the problem here?
So the fact that they still have the commercials on means that there's still people coming to them to sign up. I know that they extended the deadline to sign up multiple times. And I know that there were people that, because it's about making sure that you have healthcare coverage, right? For certain conditions. There are a lot of different conditions that are covered by that, many different cancers, and that's expensive. So they should sign up. But there's people that don't want to sign up because they feel like they are taking it. I'm not that bad, or I don't want to take it from somebody else. But as you said, that's not the case. But they still have people. Every once in a while, I still hear of somebody that hasn't signed up. The fire department did a really good job of assisting the firefighters signing up for all of them that were there. That we shouldn't be looking 25 years later and saying, having to prove that you were there. Because how do you prove that you were there now? Yeah. Yeah, but that's the challenge, right? Other than that photo.
And I haven't signed up, even though I worked
Mhm.
right by the Brooklyn Bridge.
See, he didn't sign up. See?
Because the way I understand, they'll only take you if you tell them, yes, I have cancer.
No, so you should be part of the
That's what
program.
commercials say.
Yeah, so then call them.
The attorneys.
If you haven't been, if you're not
I
registered,
have been,
if you did time down there and you're not registered, even if you don't have health problems, the idea is that if you develop them,
Sure.
and I think it's not if, it's when you develop them that there'll be coverage for you. That's what it is that you're just protecting your future self and your family, right? And your family, right? I mean, she's sitting here in the front row. She could attest to that firsthand. Thank God he was part of the program, right?
No, he wasn't. It wasn't passed at the time. So he wasn't, it wasn't passed at the time that he died. But later on, we, benefited
Yeah.
from the pension piece of it. But Zadroga didn't pass until.
Oh, so I didn't realize that. Yeah. So she could speak firsthand to the challenges of it, right? So, yeah.
Sign up. If you're not signed up and you were there,
Yeah.
sign up. Period. That's the end of the story.
And I see Rudy's in the back as well. I know you don't want to be called out, but I'm going to because he's like the top dog in Suffolk in the fire service. What is your official position? Yeah, right. So he's the top dog. It's easy to have him tell the position and me screw it up. So again, thank you for being here as well. So which is really cool. And of course, my daughter and Joe.
What years were you chief of training?
What was that?
What years were you chief of training?
I always screw this up when people say, when were you here? Well, let's see. Around 2021 through 22, 23. I retired 2 years ago. Yeah, I retired June 29th of 2024. I did 31 years, 246 days. Which, so I don't know. I loved it so much I could have continued to do it. But if people are like, why didn't you do 32 years? Who cares? Who cares? When you retire, nobody cares about that stuff. You retire when you can retire, right? And I look at it in the New York City Fire Department. I think it's the greatest job on the planet, but not many people get out without some type of you give something, in exchange for that. There's no doubt about it. You give up some of your health for that, no doubt. And I'm young enough. I want to be around. I want to see this beautiful girl get married one day. Not too soon, but I want to, we'll start with school, right? But and that's why the Mouth of the Dragon book and other things I do is about health, wellness, and longevity of firefighters. Because I would like few things more than being able to go back in time and change some of the things in the history, so she could be sitting here with a husband tonight. And if we could prevent that in the future, because sometimes the moments that never happen matter the most. But how do we get there? How do we is the challenge. And especially young firefighters think they're invincible. Young people think they're invincible, right? That's why they don't go get checkups or stuff like that. But if I could move the needle on that, that's what I do. That's what I try and do. So I do have, like I said, 3 different issues of Crackle magazine. You could take those. You could look at all the stuff up here. I have 2 of the books that my Cornerstones of Leadership. I have these. If anybody's interested in purchasing one, or 30 Fires You Must Know. Another one of my books to fire engineering. The Cornerstones of Leadership books are $40 each. These are $50 each. I don't set the price on those. And then I have 2 books that the library does not have to give them. And one is Sprinkle Street, the Fire Dog book, which happens to be, so I'm friends with the author and the illustrator of this book. So I'd like to donate this book to the library. And Dina Alley, who works with me at the First Responder Center for Excellence, I have a copy of her book, Hope Out of Darkness, and I want to donate this book to the library as well. So 2 extraordinarily good books. Yeah. Thank you. What do you think?
Do you know what this shirt is?
USA? Give me 10.